Thank you all for joining us. The Columbian is pleased to welcome candidates for Clark Public Utilities Commissioner from District 2. I think I got that right. I'm Greg Jane. I'm the editorial page editor, and we're joined by other members of the editorial board. Craig.
I'm Craig Brown. I'm the editor of the Columbian.
And Colleen.
Hi, I'm Colleen Keller. I'm the assistant news editor and a member of the editorial board.
Great. And let's see, just want to make sure I have my checklist here. And as mentioned, we are recording this. We will post it unedited online for the benefit of our readers. And now to the important part. We'll get to the candidates. Please take just 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, explain why you are running for this position, and then we'll get on to more specific topics of interest. And we'll start with Carol.
Well, first of all, thank you, editorial board of the Columbian, for creating this opportunity for all of us today. The reason I'm running for Clark Public Utilities Commissioner is I think I have the skills and the experience to be the next Public Utilities Commissioner. I spent 30 years in the electric utility industry at Oregon's largest electric utility. And over that time, I spent most of my career advocating for customers in leadership roles. I served for 15 years as an officer of the company as Vice President of Public Policy, and my last role was as Vice President of Customer Solutions. If elected as Clark Public Utilities Commissioner, my first priority is customers, putting customers first. I would continue to support delivery of safe, reliable, and affordable electricity to the customers of Clark County. Secondly, the environment. Climate change is real, and I support a cleaner, greener energy future for Clark Public Utilities. Third, technology innovation. I applaud Clark Public Utilities' $30 million investment in what we call smart meters. They're calling it advanced metering infrastructure. This will create a two-way communication opportunities between customers and the utility. I strongly urge the utility to move quickly to enable customers to participate in load reducing programs, which will in fact lower their electric bills going forward. It's an exciting future for technology and the utility. And finally, partnerships. I know that Clark has been a great member of the community, but everybody was kind of assaulted by COVID and looking for greater opportunities for partnership. Energy is something that affects everyone in our world, and I look forward to helping Clark navigate this transformational time going forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Nancy?
Yes, my name is Nancy Barnes, and I am your current Clark PUD Commissioner. I have been for 30 years. I am so proud of what we've built at this utility. The job of a Public Utility Commissioner is to deliver reliable electricity and clean, healthy water at cost to the customers in Clark County. We are one of those utilities that was formed back in the 1940s to share the benefits of the Columbia River system with all of the residents of the Northwest. And we have such a great thing going at Clark. I'm excited to keep going. I'm excited that I was part of building it. We have some of the lowest rates in the country, and we haven't raised rates in 12 years. Our electricity is highly reliable. You won't hear or read of blackouts or brownouts in the Northwest this year. And if anything happens in an emergency, we have highly skilled men and women who will come out and restore your power. We have award-winning, almost famous customer service around the country with live people answering your phone calls who are both empowered and trained to solve those issues right then. And more exciting for our future is that we are responsibly decarbonizing, which means that we are doing it without sacrificing reliability or affordability. We have programs in electrification of transportation. We have wind power. We have solar power. We have community solar projects. We were leaders in the region in doing conservation and habitat restoration and environmental issues all over the county. We have, well, you need to check on our website, but we'll come to your home, do an energy audit, help you use electricity more responsibly. We have a 20-year supply of clean water that we've developed in the county so that we will not be one of those utilities running short of clean potable water. I'm so proud of the work I've done with Clark Public Utilities, and I'm running because I want to be sure that this continues for the customers. My very top concern are the customers of Clark County.
Great, thank you. And Don.
Hello, everybody. I'm Don Steinke for Clark Public Utilities. Thank you to the Columbian for your recent editorials saying that we have an urgent need to confront climate change and that it is necessary for all levels of government to do their part, and that voting is the best tool in fighting climate change. So here we are getting ready to vote. Climate action needs to be done at the local and regional level because Congress will never act on climate. They have too many senators from small coal and oil states. That's why we need to lead at the local and West Coast level. It has to start somewhere. The incumbent talks about complying with existing regulations. My candidacy is about much more than that. It's about decarbonizing the transportation sector. To do that, Clark Public Utilities needs to rapidly increase the supply of electricity to help us to eventually replace all the gasoline and diesel in Clark County by 2045. The West Coast states have mandated a gradual transition to electric trucks, buses, and cars beginning in 2025. Walmart has ordered 2,000 electric semis. Amazon has ordered 100,000 electric delivery trucks. And according to Bloomberg this morning, Amazon is now trying to block Walmart from getting the first electric delivery trucks. We've got a lot of background noise somewhere. Our grid is not ready to handle electric trucks and buses. Our grid is not ready to handle electric trucks and buses, and no one is leading the effort to get ready. That's why I'm running for Clark Public Utilities District number 2. Lastly, for now, the private sector has raised $1 billion to develop a lower cost technology to capture greenhouse gases out of the air. They anticipate that Congress will then authorize $1 trillion per year to deploy and operate the installations. Who's going to have to pay for that? Our kid. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And yeah, I'm not sure where the background noise is coming from. But,
I hear a dog.
that was mine. That was mine. But
Okay.
anyway, yeah, let's move on. Several of you mentioned the issue of climate change. Is the utility doing enough? What else needs to be done? And I know we could get into a lot of specifics here, but let's try and focus on the major points here, and we'll start with Nancy.
Well, I'm proud of what Clark Public Utilities has done. Our programs are, again, one of the problems with climate change action all over the country. We're one of the leaders in the country. There are probably only 2 or 3 states doing more or with more rigorous standards than Washington State. And we are complying ahead of schedule. But here's the problem. We have to do it responsibly. The difference I have with a lot of our critics is that I am unwilling to go to people in the county that rent apartments or townhouses or live in trailer parks and say, you're going to pay more in your Clark Public Utilities payments so that people with a large home can, at a more reasonable or a lower price, install solar panels on their roof or EV chargers in their garage. I'm unwilling to cross-subsidize. It's a very delicate balance that we have to keep. So we are supplying net metering for people that want to put rooftop solar on. We have a large community solar project, and very exciting, next week we'll be announcing our second community solar project, and this one will specifically focus on low-income people or people that are not able at this point to put solar panels on their roof. I know that I'm criticized by Mr. Steinke because he thinks we should be out installing more electric vehicle chargers. Or that we ought to be putting somehow getting more electricity to fund to fill these. But we have always had a policy of not buying ahead of need. It has served us well. We'll have developers come in and say, I might develop over here. I'm thinking this will be a big development. We're going to need this electricity. And we say to them, when you have a plan and it's on the ground, come in and we will be sure and have the electricity that you need. The problem with buying ahead of need is you do end up with stranded costs. So we're right now in the middle of updating our integrated resource plan. We have skilled staff members with decades of experience in modeling and studying these things. They're putting forward a new update to the plan so that we can model what we think is expected in EV charging. Now, the other thing about EV charging is with our advanced metering infrastructure, which we have put $30 million into the budget for, and we are now researching and going to begin deploying these. This way, we will be able to have a two-way communication. So we will know when they're charging their vehicles, and we will be able to talk to them about charging off-peak. You know, in electricity, everything's about peak. We build every pipe to the largest use. We build every wire to the largest use. So if we can have this two-way communication, we can help them get a time of use rate so that they can charge their EVs in their home. 75% of EVs are charged in people's homes. We can help them do that at a reasonable rate and do it when it won't affect the rest of the grid or the voltage on the grid. So I have a hard time. I believe we're leaders in climate change. The evidence is all around us. We've been far ahead. The first EV charger in the county was in our parking lot. The first EVs were purchased by the utility. The first solar projects, the first demonstration solar projects were put in by Clark Public Utilities. The first conservation and environmental habitat restoration efforts, back when we were talking about WIRES, were done by Clark Public Utilities. So I think we're exactly where we need to be, responsible and taking care of our customers.
Okay, thank you. Dawn, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we need to make use of our grid 24 hours a day, not just during peak demand. And electric vehicles will allow us to, a lot of background noise. The electric vehicles will allow us to make use of the grid 24 hours a day and provide revenue 24 hours a day, more revenue than we are now during off-peak hours. And that'll help keep rates low. The law allows utilities to build more capacity for anticipated growth. Clark Public Utilities has done that several times, and they've wasted money doing that conservation. We need to plan for, promote, and support, and build more clean energy resources and electric vehicle infrastructure. We need to look for and implement more conservation projects. We need to create jobs and workforce diversity and support workforce apprenticeship. The smart grid management systems and electric vehicles will allow our substations, wires, and poles to generate steady revenue for our utility 24 hours a day, not just during peak demand. And I would start with supporting the new community solar bill and smart grids. Community solar bill right now on July 1, people like the Housing Authority of Vancouver can apply for a $25 million grant to put in solar panels. And we need somebody to lead the effort at the utility to let them know about that. And also, scrolling down on my screen here, we need to educate the public regarding the harms associated with our production of electricity. We need to educate customers about the new CETA law, which requires that we gradually shut down our fossil fuel plant and why it is beneficial to do so. The clean energy transition will give economic benefit to all parts of our community, and it will stimulate our economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol, your thoughts?
Yes, it's essential that Clark invest in programs to support the mitigation of carbon. And I do agree with Dawn, there needs to be more charging infrastructure to support electric vehicles. I'm not quite sure what Clark has done in terms of their own employee carpools and trucks, but I like to see that transition. That seems to be just good business to support the reduction of carbon emissions from vehicles. Clark has been a leader in energy, conservation rather, but energy efficiency, the door is wide open with the deployment of smart meters. And I'm encouraged to see more peak programs that, as an answer for, don't need to have workarounds, but you can use the technology to affect those, as well as smart thermostat programs for not only residential customers, but huge opportunity for business customers. And I think that the opportunities is what's changing and transformational in the energy industry is that instead of just the utility creating and distributing the energy, is what both of my colleagues have referred to, it's really the customers having control. It's the solar rooftops that they send to the utility. I think Don is more optimistic. The vehicle to grid is probably not something that's readily available. The battery dispatchable is still experimental, although my former utility has put some exciting projects in place in Eastern Oregon. What I think Clark needs to focus on right now is renewing a contract with BPA, since half of the power comes from hydro. I come from a point of view, you need to have a balanced energy portfolio and an integrated resource plan. And since hydro is so important, we need to have all hands on deck to make sure that that contract is good after the current one expires. I know River Road brings up a lot of.
When does that expire, Carol?
I think, pardon?
When is that going to expire?
2028. I know there's a lot of controversy that gets stirred up with the River Road gas plant. I would just say that 250 megawatts is not inconsequential, and the kind of technology that they're putting into play to make it flexible is important. And I do fully understand that natural gas is not low carbon, but it has 50% less emission than coal. And as we see other resources shut down, I just want to make sure that there's always a plan in place. And the way that I think the industry is looking at natural gas right now is that I think in the future it really is going to be turned on, and the flexibility is that you could turn them on really quickly in 15 minutes and be there when solar power dips. And you've all heard about the duck curve that, in California, they have, 200 gigawatts of solar, and then the sun goes down and whoops, we're at full load in the evening. And this is where the hardworking combustion combined cycle plants have come into play. Is that the solution for the future? Our future in 2045? I'm not quite sure, but my colleagues are right. We do need to catch up and have battery technology improve. There needs to be vehicle to grid as an option to send back to the grid. There needs to be more solar deployment and all of those things. And ultimately, the customer is going to be so instrumental in this transformation.
And really quick, Nancy, how many EV charging stations are there in Clark County? Do you know offhand?
Well, we have helped facilitate some large ones, for instance, for the Vancouver Public School District and for Waste Connections that has an electric garbage truck. So there's some heavy industrial ones. We control about 10 of them at our facilities. And if you look, Tesla is putting in their own EV charging stations. Those are the busiest ones in the county. So I would have to estimate we probably have maybe 40 or 50. In Clark County. But remember, 75 to 80% of customers charge in their homes. So the EV chargers you're talking about would be commercial ones out there in the community.
Yeah, I was just curious. Craig?
Yep.
I understand there's 4,500 vehicles that are registered in Clark County currently in the last year. So even if you are charging up in your house, right. If it's just your outlet, it's good to have support in the community when you're out and about on I-5 or.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I was just curious. I didn't know.
Well, so you have to remember, we don't manufacture EV chargers and we don't install EV chargers. So what Mr. Steinke is talking about is he believes we are not planning adequately for the electricity to support EV chargers. Because
right. No, I was just curious how many there are.
Okay. About 6% of the vehicles in Clark County are either hybrid or EV vehicles.
Okay. Craig?
I think all those vehicles are in my neighborhood. Just
Lucky you.
One thing that's widely seen as a community problem in Clark County is affordable housing. What role can Clark Public Utilities play in helping to solve this crisis? And let's start with Don.
Well, that's a surprise question.
Try.
Well, for one thing, the Building Association has lobbied against efficiency standards at the national level, and they are supported by the gas industry. And they will always say that making the buildings more efficient is going to make the housing less affordable. However, what happens when they do that? When they build them on less efficient, then we end up having to pay as a community to upgrade those facilities later on, and it costs much more money. For example, Clark Public Utilities and Clark County are in partnership to do weatherization programs for buildings that weren't built right in the first place. And this goes on and on and on. We end up paying for it as a community when they don't do it right. There's one building in Portland called the PAE building, which produces more energy per year than it uses. And if buildings are built right, they'll use less electricity over the long term. They might cost a little bit more up front, but they'll be easier on the renter and on the tenant over a course of 10 years. And so I'm in favor of doing what we need to do to make the energy costs more affordable over the years. The builders don't have to pay for the energy bills. It's the tenant that has to pay for it. They're stuck with it. And in 30% of the buildings in Clark County, there's no way to plug in your card because they're multifamily developments. So I would focus on doing the right things up front rather than having to come back and do it later on. For example, you need to have the building solar ready. The roof needs to be strong enough to hold the solar. The wires need to be in place to receive the electricity from the solar, and the wires need to be in place for the charging infrastructure before you pour the pavement. All those things will be better in the long term, but may make it a little bit more expensive up front. But in the long term, it'll be better, save us all money.
Carol, you want to try to tackle that question?
Of course. Well, I think there's so much that can be done in the construction industry to make housing affordable from the energy perspective. I was involved in projects at my former employer to target low-income communities, both multifamily, and multifamily was a great investment to tackle as many homeowners as possible from both an educational perspective and also a pocketbook issue, to get solar on the rooftops, to put the smart thermostats in, to put charging stations in the garage, and even have them participate in load reducing programs. So I think I haven't seen too much conversation about construction, and I haven't noticed a lot in the community with low income housing from an energy efficiency perspective, or for that matter, just any income family. So I think there's just a huge opportunity there. Before I left my previous employer, we were working in neighborhoods. Like what does a smart community look like? And a smart community would have transit that's, we did partnerships with TriMet, would have transit that's energy efficient, would have charging stations for transit, would have charging public, community charging stations, would have the whole community be solar, would have batteries in the community. So I think the future holds for Clark County an opportunity to do some of these innovative things, which I'm pro partnership in the community, because you can't do this on your own. And so many of the communities want to be smart, but they don't know what smart is. And to me, smart is being clean and green, sustainable for the community, as well as a utility issue. And it should be, it should be attainable. And I guess the final point is inclusivity is important to me. It shouldn't be, I'm rich, so I get solar. I'm rich, so I get the smart thermostat. I get the perks. It should be across the economy, absolutely, because climate affects us all, and it should be an equal opportunity piece.
Nancy, you want to try to tackle that one?
Well, first I would have to say this is out of Clark Public Utilities bailiwick. We don't control anything about building, but we do, and many of you have been to our Home and Garden Idea Fair, we do spend a lot of time and energy educating builders and developers on how to create homes that are energy efficient and have some of these bells and whistles that they're talking about. However, Clark County has a critical need of affordable housing. Everybody knows this, and we have to start working on it. And as the building code group in the state, unelected officials got together and firmed up these much more rigorous building code standards, such as prefixing it for charging stations and requiring solar on the roof. We will continue to drive many people in Clark County out of housing. They simply can't afford it. So I think it has to be done much more responsibly. Now, I know Ms. Dillin worked for an investor-owned utility. Well, they have a completely different approach to pleasing customers and keeping their rates down. Clark Public Utilities is owned and served by our customers. We have to consider all the time what will happen to their bottom line and how to spend their money. We don't get any tax money. We have no taxing ability, and we don't charge any taxes to anybody. So it really has to be a zero-sum game for us. I'm really excited about all the futuristic communities that people talk about, where we put in all this infrastructure, you know, the Austin, Texas kind of thing. But that's not Vancouver. Right now, we have too many people homeless on the street, leaving their households. We actually administer the funds for the TRAP program, the Treasury program for rental assistance. And we have many people coming into our facilities that can't pay their rent, can't pay their utility bills. You drive around Clark County. These ideas people are throwing around here are being given to you by people that own homes and have nice places to live and can afford to do these things. And I say, bravo, bully for you. You put up the charging infrastructure, you put up the solar panels, you buy the EVs, but don't require people that can't afford them to do that. The crisis in affordable housing is real in Clark County. Every time we add requirements for building codes and regulations, we make it less and less affordable for so many people that need housing.
And really quick, just a second, I'm just curious, Nancy, what is the utilities annual budget?
About $340 million.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. Dawn, you were going to say?
Yeah, the new community solar bill is intended to provide solar for the low-income people. Like you have to be, it'd be 100%. It would be mainly go through nonprofit organizations like the Vancouver Housing Authority or any other nonprofit that is intended to serve that community. Furthermore, the Climate Commitment Act has a carbon tax built in it, but is intended to tax the rich and give the money to the poor, essentially.
So the solar project I told you about, our next community solar project, is one that is an answer to this piece of legislation. It will be for low-income qualifying communities and customers. But remember, these customers will buy a few little solar panels. I own a piece of our community solar project, and it offsets a small amount of my energy bill, but these people still have to pay their electric bills. The community solar project for low-income people will not give them enough energy from solar to offset their entire electric bill. So yes, that's partially true, and this will be a good solar project. I'm excited. We've done a lot of work on it, and we'll be announcing it this coming week. But this doesn't solve the issue of the people that pour into our offices that need help paying their energy bills. I believe I can't in good conscience ask them to pay more money to do some of these things with unproven technology that people should be paying for themselves.
Okay.
May I just make a comment?
Sure.
One thing, just in terms of what falls within the purview of utility, I've always had a perspective, whether you're investor owned or customer owned, that, you know, sometimes you can put things out because it's the right thing to do. When I was at my former company, we created the first solar highway. We also created the first electric avenue. We did this without funds from customers or shareholders, but just the contributions of new tech people who wanted to be out there and be known. We also had the first quick charging stations outside of our headquarters. I participated in one of the first Nest thermostat demonstrations in the country. I think there's just a benefit for having a perspective that you are going to do more for customers and the community and the industry, and you can do that whether you're customer owned or shareholder owned. And I just might say that even there's a distinction between the two types of utilities. One thing that's not different is that my experience is I've always put customers first, and I do that for an investor-owned utility, and I do that for a customer-owned utility as well.
Okay, thank you. Colleen, did you have anything?
Yes, I was wondering if the three of you would comment on where you might stand on nuclear power. We're reading more and more now with the demands that are coming for our electric grid, that even some environmentalists are rethinking nuclear. What would be your thoughts on that? And Dawn, why don't you start, please?
Right now, the Clark Public Utilities has been authorized by the current commission to be in secret talks with the nuclear industry about that in the future. And as best as I can tell, it's going to be at least 7 years away before FERC even approves of any of those new designs for a small modular nuclear. And as I've been reading it, the small scale modular group is hoping to have the rates be as low as $60 per megawatt hour. But I've been reading from Columbia Insight that currently solar plus batteries is coming under $40 per megawatt hour, and that BPA, firm power from BPA, is around $37 a megawatt hour. And the most expensive part of the BPA system is the Lower Snake River Dam and the nuclear power plant we already have. And so when nuclear has fewer harms, when it becomes cheaper, and when it's available, let me know. Right now, solar and batteries is the best way to go for the next 5-6 years.
Okay, Carol, how about you?
Again, I'm bullish on new technology and what it can provide, but there has to be a lot of research and has to be proven before you set it out there. Former colleagues that have worked with NuScale for years, I came to PGE when we had the Trojan nuclear plant. It's not for the faint of heart to go down a path of nuclear power. It's time for new technology. I'm not quite sure whether I've seen different proposals for Idaho Power and other companies that would have been bankrupted had they gone down a path of nuclear power. It's a huge investment. I can't see that Clark would do it on its own. It would be in partnership and collaboration with other entities. So if I were elected, I would want to be part of a think group, if you will, studying carefully what is proposed. But I think Dawn's right. It's down the path a ways, and it'd have to get to a very economic place and environmentally safe, and pass all the difficult tests that would be necessary to welcome nuclear back. I know there was 3 large proposals of the traditional kind of nuclear in the southeast that folks were watching in the last several years, and none of them went forward.
Okay, thank you. And Nancy.
Well, there have been interesting articles in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and a great one in the Columbian just the other day. And basically what they're saying, and I agree with, is that it needs to be under consideration. Not all nuclear power is the same. This secret negotiation that Mr. Steinke talks about is that very publicly, several months ago, we sent a letter of interest to UAMPS. They are one of the organizations that's working with NuScale on their small modular reactors. And it allowed us to get some information from them, as long as we agreed not to share it with lots of other people. So that is the secret meetings that we're having. Xcel Energy also has a small modular reactor. And in fact, the Department of Energy has given billions of dollars to develop these. Now, nuclear still has a lot of problems, as was pointed out in the Columbian article. We're still concerned about nuclear waste. We're still concerned about cost overruns. I don't believe small modular reactors are 7 years out, probably more like 3 or 4 years out. And remember, these small reactors are settled together in groups. So you'd have to have a number of utilities that would own pieces of this modular reactor. I think it's an interesting technology. I think it should be considered. I would never dismiss it out of school, just like some people do. If we are going to reach a zero energy future, it has to be one of the things that we consider.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Colleen, anything else?
No, that was all.
Okay, kind of the gist, this all comes back to, regardless of how we are producing electricity, it comes back to the grid and whether the grid can handle it and handle the increasing need. And particularly if we do add a great number of EV charging stations, what changes does Clark Utilities need to make to the grid? And we'll start with Nancy.
I think we need to continue with our project to deploy the advanced metering, the smart meters. That way we can help people understand when to charge, when to turn on their dryers. We can give them information and they can give us information so we can better serve these new loads. But remember, in the last several years, all of the load growth for Clark Public Utilities in Clark County has been filled by energy efficiency and conservation. We hold a seat on the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and we have a member of our staff that sits on that seat. The smart appliances and the energy efficiency of appliances are growing exponentially. And if you'll remember, one of the most recent conservation discoveries were LED light bulbs. We've saved many, many megawatts of electricity by giving out LED light bulbs. We had a project which we've since scrapped, and it's too long a discussion to give it all to you, where we went into low-income houses and installed Nest thermometers and told them how to use them. And we installed line voltage thermometers in homes that had, the radiant heat, the little cadet heaters, and they couldn't tell from one room to another at a reasonable level what the heat and electricity, what the heat and air conditioning was in the room. So we went into multiple housing complexes and helped these people install these in each room so they could turn their little grids up and turn their little heaters up and down, and then install Nest thermometers. And we gave each of them at every residence 10 LED light bulbs. Well, what we found as we looked at that program was that we were saving so much electricity for each of them with the LED light bulbs. It was almost worth the $2 million that we put into this program. As an interesting observation on society today, we discontinued that program. COVID hurt it a lot. We couldn't get into people's homes. But what we found were the very lowest income people, their lives are in such chaos. They have so many things to worry about. This was the last thing on their list. They sometimes wouldn't sign the papers to let us bring them free things. They sometimes wouldn't agree to let us in. We had to have a certain number of people in a housing complex sign up, and they wouldn't agree to do it. So we ended that program, but we will be searching again for a way to make the housing stock in Clark County more energy efficient, so we can save money for our lowest income customers in their electric bills.
Now, with if the load increase in recent years has been covered by conservation, but is that sustainable? Is it possible to keep finding avenues for conservation?
Well, to a certain extent it is. We have very rigorous conservation programs, but no, I think eventually people are going to have to find a way to increase their load. And some of the future ideas that Clark has is that we're in negotiation right now with a hydro project in Northeast Washington State to sign a power purchase agreement to purchase all of that hydroelectricity. We're negotiating on the transmission to bring it to Clark County, and that will be 87 megawatts of clean, carbon-free hydropower. We also are negotiating with the Bonneville Power Administration right now. You've heard alluded to the fact that we're going to turn our base load plant into a flexible plant. And in order to do that and comply with the Clean Energy Transformation Act, we've asked to swap power with the Bonneville Power Administration. We will provide them with a portion of the power from our natural gas plant, and they will replace it with clean hydropower. But that's important because our plant would continue running. The residents of Clark County outright own a $250 million power plant that I'm not just going to turn off. So they will then own this power plant. It provides voltage support all over the Portland area. It provides capacity, which is the electricity we need when it's very hot or very cold. We'll retain some of that capacity, and we'll bargain that with the Bonneville Power Administration so they will get some of that capacity for use in the region. So
okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off there and move on. Get back to the question of what changes need to be made to the grid. Don, your thoughts?
Well, reducing demand is really important. Although it's not particularly wires related, but reducing demand helps. And one program that the Clark PUD has that I want to see them do much more of, and they couldn't because of COVID, is the heat pump water heaters and the ductless heat pump systems. That's really important. There are thousands of house trailers in Clark County that are using the worst kind of electric heaters, electric resistance water heaters, and the heat pump water heaters are much more efficient. But I also agree that we need a smart grid, and a smart grid means, to me, being able to integrate continually changing resources with continually changing loads. And then also regarding your question, Greg, about is it sustainable to have more conservation projects? Well, it's a funny thing. Low-hanging fruit keeps growing back. And the reason why it keeps on growing back is because the building industry keeps on building buildings that won't meet the code that's coming up in the next 3 years. Like we have the best code in the nation coming up in 2031, and the builders are trying to get built before that happens, so they don't have to comply, and then so we'll have low-hanging fruit to deal with then. And so those are some of my answers. But I agree with Nancy that we need that transmission lines are expensive, and that they maybe, instead of having transmission lines go long distance, we need to focus on producing our own energy locally in our own community. And I've been told that basically our electric bill is 1/3 the energy, 1/3 the long distance transmission system, and 1/3 our local distribution systems such as substations, poles, and wires. I don't know how accurate I am on that because no one's given me the information, but that's what I've heard. And so,
okay, and I'm going to move on. Carol, how secure is the grid?
Well, in the Northwest, I'm feeling pretty good about the grid and the improvements that have been made. A lot of what we're talking about in terms of the new power plants, the wind plants in Columbia Hills and the solar plants in Oregon. I know that Clark's getting 3% of their energy from wind contract, and usually the way that these wind plants are going in and solar is that transmission is close by. So in a lot of the projects that I know, like this new Wheat Ridge one in Eastern Oregon, you have the gas turbines, you have battery, you have the solar, and you have it conveniently located to the transmission, also close to the hydro too, the transmission from the Dalles. So it's wise to have transmission, and quite frankly, a lot of transmission projects were canceled just because of this. That you knew the people who are doing the integrated resource planning knew that there was going to be demand for renewables, and you had to have these close by to firm up the renewables and have them close to other resources. So I'm not so worried about that. The way I'm looking at modernization of the grid is that this is what Clark's starting down the path with the smart meters. That's modernization, and then working on the distribution side to make sure that there's smart feeder switches. Once you get a lot of solar in the neighborhood, you don't panic and say, I wonder if we could take all that. You have monitoring to see where's solar coming in. I have no idea what the penetration of solar is in Clark County. I bet it's not a lot. And it takes a lot to overload feeders in a neighborhood. I remember our engineers going through neighborhoods and saying, at what point do we worry? It gets to be a lot of solar. So, and it gets to be a lot of EVs plugged into garages to create an overload, because these, feeders and particularly transmission is built to carry a lot of electricity. So I think the kind of modernization is going to happen at the where data is coming together, that outage alerts will be more, there'll be more synchronicity, that you'll know what's going on, that people will know when there's a lot of solar coming through, and being able to work with the on the computerized side rather than a lot of infrastructure being built to support it, if that makes sense.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Craig or Colleen, anything else?
I have maybe one
We'll
more
move
question
on.
that we
Yeah.
touched
Yeah,
on
go.
earlier, but I'd like to hear a little bit more on it. So, what are the limits to activism by a public utility district, which is a government agency? So, where does activism end or go too far? So, Carol, you want to try that question first?
Could you be a little bit more
I think it's
specific? I'm not quite sure where you're aiming. If it's on, is activism on the climate side, or is activism with this role in particular, or leadership? I'm not quite sure where you're going.
mostly on the climate side. So, how much of an active role should a public utility district take in climate change? What's appropriate and what's inappropriate?
Well, it's appropriate to, again, back to the climate change. While some people may be in doubt, it's real. The planet is burning, and we need to be responsive. And the electric utility industry has a particularly important role to play. And with all of the public utilities in Washington working on the Clean Energy Transformation Act, it's an imperative that we all work together on what are the solutions to mitigate carbon emissions. So I think it's one of the most important pillars to work on over the next 20 years. I don't see how you can do any kind of planning without having climate change front and center with, again, back to vehicle pools. What are you doing? What are you doing with your facilities? And are they representative of, climate emissions? What are you doing again, Clark, I applaud them. What are you doing with the power plants? If they're not flexible, then they are going to be stranded assets because nobody's going to want them. And as you look at your fuel mix, 50% hydro. I know there's some flexibility with BPA. You can go to the market to do other things. Can you go to the market and buy more green power that makes sense and is economically viable? So I think there's lots of positive activism that can take place, and that Clark may be, in the scheme of things, have a smaller footprint than others. I think there's always room for positive activism to make a difference in a community and in a state that is committed to a clean and green future.
Okay, thanks. Nancy, what do you think?
So I know I sound repetitive, but my job as a PUD commissioner is to deliver reliable electricity and clean water at cost to my customers. My focus is always on our customers. I'm not here to change the world. I don't work for Governor Inslee. I don't work for a bunch of lobbyists. I'm supposed to listen to my customers and try to give them what it is they need. We do work with the Washington PUD Association, and especially work with the Department of Ecology and Department of Commerce in working out the rules and regulations for some of the new legislation that Washington has passed. I think PUD commissioners need to be careful, because if you're working very hard for a special interest group like solar power or wind power or EV chargers, if you're working and lobbying for them, sometimes it's easy to forget that you're really working for the customers of Clark County.
Okay, thank you. Don, how about you?
J.D. Powers has an award for sustainability. Clark Public Utilities has not received that award. They may not even know about it. And maybe that exists because I asked them to create one, and the Sacramento Municipal Utility District has received the top award for sustainability. And as part of their J.D. Powers Sustainability Award, they say the utility needs to educate people about climate change and about the impacts of their facilities on that. And so I would start that way with advocacy, is to educate the public about what we need, what the harms of what we're doing, and what we need, and why we need to move away from that, and all the programs we need to do to reduce our emissions. So that's what I would support is the JD Power Sustainability Plan. And also the City of Vancouver has a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 80% by the year 2030. I led the effort to make that happen. And the city sees the Clark Public Utilities as a major barrier to getting anywhere near that.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on now. Very briefly, give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any notable endorsements if you'd like. We'll start with Dawn.
The clean energy transition will create tremendous economic benefits to the people of Clark County. It's going to do that nationwide. It's going to create jobs and economic business opportunities for small businesses, and that benefit won't come to Clark County unless the commissioners get on board with that. And let's see. And so I believe that the clean energy transition will keep rates low, and about as low as they can be, and that the cost of solar is going to be ridiculously cheap. That's all the forecasts I've read. And so regarding my endorsements, I've received, I don't know that I've asked for any endorsement except one, and I got that one from the former mayor of Camas. And but I have 18 former and current elected officials that have endorsed me, and I've raised $32,000, not from any special interest group, not from any corporation, all from grassroots people. And I recruited 7 people to run for this office over the last few years, and they thought I was the best qualified to do it instead, and they each donated $1,000 to $2,000 to my campaign. So I wanted them to run because I wanted somebody younger than me and a woman I wanted to run, but I didn't succeed, and so here I am.
Okay. Thank you. Nancy, final pitch to voters.
I'm very excited about the great things that are happening at Clark Public Utilities. I believe we are achieving a really responsible balance for our customers. I believe I'm doing my job of providing very efficient electricity and clean, healthy water to my customers at cost. I believe I'm being responsive to the concerns they have about climate change. Climate change is all around us. No one is denying that. What we're saying is, are we going to implement these technologies? Are we going to do these new green things on the backs of the poor and the middle class? Or are we going to do them responsibly? Beware of people that propose lots of great programs and don't tell you how much they're going to cost or who's going to pay for them. I'm going to tell you, we have no tax money. All of our revenue, all $340 million of it, comes from the bills that the people in Clark County pay. And they're telling me they want things increasingly green, but they want us to do it responsibly. And look, we're doing it. We have a great thing going, and I want to continue to be the PUD commissioner so I can keep this great work going.
All right, thank you. And Carol?
Well, thank you for the time today. I just want to reiterate that I have the skills and the experience to do the tough job for customers. I spent more than 30 years working for Oregon's largest electric utility, and I look forward to re-entering the energy sector as Clark Public Utilities Commissioner and putting customers first on my agenda. I promise you, we'll do more great things together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all 3 of you.
Thank you, all of you
And
too.
good luck.